and has been, oops, that's one gone. It's really, really tricky. So far, they've made it look quite easy. So one has gone. So he's on a penalty of 3. That will show on your screens fairly soon. Time ticking by for him, but very new to this. And as Bram said, when we were so fortunate to have him pop into the commentary box twice to talk us through both Tracy Bowman's dressage test and Luca's, who he's been here training. Not only is he driving himself, and I've just had a message from Mary Phelps. I know you're listening, Mary. She's part of the American squad that's over here for the Pony Champs next week, and she's been training with the Chardon family for the last month or 6 weeks. So not only are top competitors, but they are very sought-after trainers as well. But Bram made the observation that there isn't the depth of driving or four-in-hand driving in Italy that certainly the Germans and the Belgians and the Dutch and the British, to some extent the French, have, who are our strongest nations, the Hungarians certainly. Even the Swedes, we've got 2 cracking competitors here. So he's quite a sort of lone wolf in terms of four-in-hand driving in Italy. So he's done really, really well. Got these 4 very good-looking horses, big striding horses, and looks like he swapped them in front. I'm pretty sure the one with the long white leg was on the other side for the dressage. So we're running in reverse order of the 38. Luca is currently sitting in 35th position, but absolutely brilliant to be here. Everybody's had to qualify to be in the four-in-hand championships. They must be 3-star drivers, and they must have completed the requisite number of qualifying events since January 2022. We're not in the 19s anymore, 2022, but at least one of those events must have been this season. So just gathering himself up to snake through the zigzag, and he's got through there cleanly. So those balls, it was number 3 that got the rub, still on 3 penalties, but in this super big arena, they're able to make the most of it. For the dressage, we used about 3/4 of it, and we had the 2 obstacles 1 and 2 in yesterday. But the full range, whoops, that's quite a swing round. So C has just gone in the second of the zigzags at 16, and number 19 and 20. Well, it started very well for Luca. So actually very well judged in terms of time, only 0.99 penalties, so 1.98 over the time allowed, so 191.98, so 190, the time that you're aiming to not exceed. So 4 cones roll, 3, 16C, 19 and 20. It's quite frustrating. You get to the end of the course and you think you've just about got there. And quite often it's those naughty end cones. It certainly had a bearing on the World Singles Championships last year, flipped the end result. The French lady who looked on course just clipped the last one. So you have to drive every millimetre of the way. But you'll just see the team on the ground there, just reconstructing it, and with his sort of T-shaped measure there. And there's Jerome. He's got a measuring stick there too. Really important. Oops, he's just knocked the ball off. But he doesn't get penalised for that. Peter Huaz, from a very famous driving family, one of the next generation Hungarian drivers, a nation that totally dominated the sport. I've said all through the coverage, they really were pretty much untouchable in terms of medals when combined driving became an FEI sport in the late 1960s, early 70s, and indeed the very, very first European Championship was in 1971 in Budapest. And the roll call for honours there: Imre Aboyni, Sandor Fulop and Joseph Pap. 1, 2, 3. slightly knocked off their perch in 1973 for the second European Championships at Windsor, and that was very much when a lot of the big names in British driving, people like Frank Hayden, Bernard Mills, and His Royal Highness the late Duke of Edinburgh, they were very much involved in the early stages of ratifying the rules. And so in 1973, the British hosted the European Championships at Windsor. Auguste Dubé, many of you will have read his book. He was a wonderful ex-military man in Switzerland, a trainer of horses, and Robert Dudin. They won gold and silver, but Douglas Nicholson, the Nicholson family, very much associated with coaching in the British Isles. On to 6 penalties. 2 balls have gone at 3. 3 seems to be really catching everybody out, and 6A just opening, going into the double L there. And a bell ring. A bell ring for Peter. So you can see just lying on the ground there is part of the double L, so that's why he's got a bit of an extra penalty for going through there. Currently on 9 in terms of the penalties. And don't start again before the bell. Yes, if any part of an obstacle has to be rebuilt before you've gone through it, that's what can happen. But you must make sure, we saw that in Pretoni, actually, one of the Australian drivers, not the one that became world champion, but he actually started before the bell rang, and that resulted in elimination. So Peter has started once again back on track. Leaders bobbing along nicely, driving round. There's very few direct straight lines. It's all on the curve. If you can see the plan, lots of curves and loops going through. And going forward into the canter. You don't want them too strong in your canter and the cones, because if they get a little bit exuberant, then some of the listening techniques from your horses can go out the water a little bit. You just want them working well together, which they are for Peter. The drivers will be back in the same carriages that they used for the dressage. So same widths and pretty much the same role for those 2 grooms on the back. Absolutely vital that they do not become involved. They were extremely active in more ways than one in the marathon yesterday, not just with keeping the driver on course, but very much those on the bottom step, jumping around the back of the carriage, making sure that everything stayed upright, that the balance was correct, leaning into the bends or up a hill. So we've got one long striding wheel horse there, everybody else going into a nice hand canter. Through 18. Oh, slight wiggle there, but got away with it. And we're into time now. So that's why it's clocking up at 200.47 for time.
Listed at seconds is 210.47.
So there will have been an extra 10 seconds added there. So if any part of an obstacle in advance of one is being driven is knocked down, the bell will be rung for the obstacle to be rebuilt. 3 penalties and 10 seconds. That's one of the ways you can get it. 3 penalties for lots of things. Driving without a whip or dropping or putting down your whip will give you 5 penalties. If the groom handles the reins, brakes or uses the whip before the athlete has crossed the finishing line, that's 20 penalties. Elimination. If you start without protective headgear, or if your grooms are not wearing protective headgear, you'll notice that the main difference between the turnouts from Thursday and Friday's dressage and here in the cones is that the ruling has been brought in that everybody on the carriage must be wearing regulation hard hats. If the athlete enters the arena without the hat fastened, or without a jacket, gloves or an apron, so the apron is the knee rug that they all wear, they will get 5 penalties. And if the groom enters without fastened protective headgear, jacket or gloves, they also get 5 penalties. If the groom is not in position, first breach 5, second breach 10, third breach elimination. So you don't want willful grooms. It can be jolly expensive. If you drive a carriage with no brakes, particularly with the singles, you will be eliminated. If a person is tied to the carriage, you will also be eliminated. What that really means is if they have one of the big belts on that we saw being worn yesterday on the marathon, and it is fixed to the carriage, prohibited outside assistance. So if somebody gets over enthusiastic for the side and comes in, that will result in elimination as well. Failing to start within 45 seconds of the bell ring, just like in jumping, lots of other competitions, the timing will start. So you will start clocking up the times. And that number 3 has gone again. My goodness, that's challenging. Our later drivers, of course, will be watching this. And this is Westoff Sadowski, who is our only Polish representative. He is on 227.86, but definitely wins the prize for the whole of the competition so far for the best salute at the end of his dressage test. Gave the judges quite a flourish with his grey top hat through the air. If the carriage overturns, you'll be eliminated. Those 3 penalties for the balls rolling any part of an obstacle that has already been driven. So you want to avoid them even if you've been through them. Taking an obstacle out of sequence, which means the wrong course. That is elimination. And failure to halt after the bell is rung for a second time. Now, that's actually easier to do than you think because you're concentrating so hard going around these courses. Any of you that are involved in jumping competitions, if you've got 2, or dressage even, when there's lots of rings going at once or arenas, it can be jolly difficult to concentrate on what is your bell or car horn. So you really need to listen out for that multitasking. If a groom leads a horse through an obstacle, that is 25 penalties. These are what happens when you have a fault competition, which we have here. You can also run cones as timed competitions, but at a championship like this, very much on penalties. If you exceed the time limit, so there is certainly on our map of the cones, we have a maximum time. I think it's a little bit blurred, but it's 400. So if you're taking a really long time and you go over 400 seconds, you will be eliminated. But you're not having the greatest of day if you get to that point. At the moment, still only 1 down, which is number 3. Time looking pretty good. I've got a screen here that each time a turnout passes through safely, they get a green light, a green glow round the little box. But if they knock it, they get a red glow. So that's my colour coding for today. If your grooms stand between the start and finish lines, that's 5 penalties. So quite important that as an athlete you have a good awareness of the rules. Another one has gone, number 18. That's quite a turnaround from that. That was that narrow oxer. If you're going to do it, knock it properly. So 3 and 18, but a very good time of 190.35. So that's 0.18. Total penalty score of 6.18, which puts him currently on a total of 231.04. So he has retained his position ahead of the earlier drivers. Westoff is still in front of Peter and Luca and Hans and Harry, who've just been.
Next to go is
So if you're just joining us, wherever you may be, it is a delight to have you here. It is a delight, and we've had 4 great days of competition so far. It's been a brilliant team on the ground, bringing you the coverage from Clip My Horse. And luckily, the conditions have just turned wonderful in this sunshine. So probably as you tuned in, if you were with us right from the start, you will have noticed it was a bit grey and wet. Everybody was walking this course with their rain max on, or the umbrellas up, or both, because when it rains here, it really does come down. But now, oh, somebody looks like they're getting a bit strong. He's having to use his brake. You can hear yeah, a little bit exuberant from one of the leaders there. We have Simon Sandor, who is driving as an individual for Hungary. He's had one already. That number 3 needs to have a warning on it. Just coming into the double L. Looks fairly straightforward to drive, but don't forget these turnouts are about 12 metres long. And you've got 4 horses who can be quite free-thinking. And that's a bell ring. Yeah, he's just realised that the bell has rung. It looked like, did he miss a cone?
when you hear the bell, you can continue the course.
So, yeah, so he's starting again. That looked like an error of course. Was it? He's gone back round. So still on 1 penalty, but there will probably be some time to add as well. They got through 7. Yeah, no, seemed to go through 7. 8. Oh, I see. It was a knock of 2. Right. That's just come up on my screen. Yes, so that's what happened there. So knocking down. So 6 to add 2 and 3 in red. Yes, for causing an obstacle or part of an obstacle to be rebuilt. So that's probably just to confirm what happened to Peter, because he actually knocked part of that bridge off. So that's the 3 seconds and 10 penalties to be added. So if you're going to knock them, just do it gently. Currently sitting in 32nd position. You can see there from the screens. Yes, it's very tempting to look down, but it's actually one of the things you should try not to do in cones. So he's chosen to loop round inside there to set himself up for number 17. That's tighter than it looks, but he's managed to pull it off. And on he goes with his Hungarian and Lipizzaners. He has, what's he driving for the cones? He's got 3 stallions, Barrow Favori, Neapolitano Nimrod. He was using for the marathon, not for the cones, and Siglavi Capriola and Harkos. So, team of Hungarians and I think 1 Romanian Lipizzaner. He knocked the cones numbers 2 and 3, and time of 2:07.87. So if you halve that, the difference, which is 17.87, that gives you 8.94. Rounding it up, for those of you that are good at mental arithmetic. And so the cones total 14.94. Currently puts him into 4th place in the cones competition. And in the standings slides him behind Westoff Sadowski, who's just been for Poland. In the meantime, from the national Hungarian Lipizzaner stud, Svil Vazvaradi, we have Ferenc Galbach Jr. And these are all Lipizzaners that are bred at this wonderful national stud, which really should be on your bucket list of places to go. And indeed, if you are a fan of this sport, which you probably are if you've tuned in at the moment, this will be the setting for the next four-in-hand World Championship next year. So how the World Championships work. The standalone World Championships used to be sort of every 4 years in between a World Equestrian Games. So actually there were World Champions every 2 years. But after trial, it was decided that actually it's jolly difficult for one national federation to have all of the disciplines, the FEI disciplines, together. So last year, the jumping, dressage and vaulting went to Herning in Denmark, and the ridden eventing and the four-in-hand driving went to Protoni del Vivaro in Italy. That said, the bidding process has just been confirmed. There's open and some bids have been received for the next event, which would be in 2026. And already, I think Aachen in Germany have put forward a bid that they might be able to host everybody all at once, which would be lovely. It's utterly magical when you can get all the disciplines together, but it is a huge organisational feat because each discipline has quite different requirements. But Ferenc, so far, so good. All green lights on my screen. He's come out of the first of the zigzags well through number 12. 13 next. Will it be lucky for him? That oxer, the narrow oxer, denoted by the blue cones, 5 meters less in width than the red cones. And the horse is flowing forward. Oh, so that, he wasn't sure if he wanted to come around, but he did anyway. Yeah, that's tricky. There's been a strategic placing of that pair of cones in relation to the podium. Into the second of the zigzags. Each cone, there's a straight line, so although the cones are offset, going down through that zigzag line, oh, that's a pretty picture. Look at those leaders, they were just in sequence for a moment there. And bouncing along. Quite often when we're in dressage, rather when we're doing our cones, we wish that the trot we had was one that we could get in dressage, but there's, you know, we're at a different stage in the competition, but you'd often get a lovely trot from your horses in this phase. Everyone's a bit more relaxed in comparison to being scrutinised by 5 judges. But that was a great round, just a few penalties to add for time. So that certainly is a very, very competitive round. 2:04.18, no cones to add. Bit of time, so that's 14.18 divided by 2. Each second is 0.5, so 7.09 at the moment. That puts him into 3rd position in terms of the cones competition, which is, although part of the bigger event, each phase has its own prize giving, which is great. And puts him in the current running into first position on 221.82. At the moment, no bearing yet on any of the national teams, and we wouldn't expect till we get onto the final lot of four in hands later on today for that to come into play. But it is incredibly tight between the Netherlands and Germany. The Netherlands would dearly love to retain all their golds on home soil, but the Germans, who have Boyd Excel as their trainer at the moment, he was pretty worn out yesterday. He'd cycled all round the marathon, coaching each of the 7 German drivers, and Radek Neshvasil, who has had a great event so far. He was training him as well. So 8 turnouts all through the marathon. He was on his bike. Christian Schogelhofer for Austria. We have an Austrian team. Daniel Schneider's had a cracking marathon yesterday to pull him up the rankings, just like he did up the placings and probably the rankings at the end of it. Oh, Lady Luck was smiling on Christian with that one, because that was just a rub, but there wasn't a roll. Through that double L. There's Mr. Bateman, our technical delegate. Very, very knowledgeable gentleman. Travels all over the world, helping make sure that the rules are being abided by and everything's okay. And Philip has a phrase for everything in life, even early in the morning. Number 9, green lights popping up on my screen. Oh, apart from C. Commentator's curse. Sorry, Christian. And he just knocked C. 9C has gone, so 1 ball down so far on your screens. After competitions A and B, A being the dressage, B being the marathon, he is currently in 30th position on 209.76, so that's his running position. Talking of which, the horses have just picked up the pace. There's a bit of a longer stretch, as you're probably getting to know the course, going down 212, and although it's very tempting to really push the horses on to gain some ground, if you're having to then ask them to come down another gear, that can be tricky. So it's just finding that rhythm, the ground covering rhythm, whereby you can really drive them and maintain your accuracy. But that's a great trot he's got there. Ali, yeah, don't look down, because then you unbalance yourself. You've got to think about your own balance as a driver. What's in the brain goes down the rein, and where your seated position is. If you're a skier, you'll know that all you have to do is sort of shift your weight, particularly on modern skis. My goodness, isn't it much easier skiing nowadays than it used to be? Much easier to look stylish anyway than those great long things we used to go on. And similar principles when you're sitting on your box on the carriage, which is the name of the seat, and if you shift your weight through your seat bones, you want to have a firm core when you're driving as well. Lots of yoga and Pilates if you're interested in that sort of thing. Oh, swept round there, but got away with it. Luck still on his side. 1 has gone, that number 9C. And a good time, puts himself into the lead at the moment, 188.74, so in under that crucial 190 mark. But yes, wherever your head is on your body, the head is sort of actually the single largest part of your body. So if you start moving your head around too much when you're driving, it actually very subtly throws you off balance. So that's why you must always be looking up and forward, particularly when you're driving the cones. But we're only human. Very, very tempting to look down. Christian's team of 4 horses, made up of some Hungarian sports horses, Lipizzaner, Dutch Hackney, Romanian Lipizzaner, a mixed team. Marcus Stockmeister next, currently sitting in 29th, so we are going backwards in the order, should we say. And he actually had some pretty decent marathon obstacles yesterday. Just putting his hand up to the judges to acknowledge that he's ready to go. He's got some German sports horses here. DSP, they're known as. And who's he driving? His father, Jörg, and brother Tom also compete, very much influenced by one of our drivers here on the German squad, Georg von Steen. And Marcus studied agriculture at the Martin Luther University. So who's he got in for cones? On my sheet it says it should be Bravo S, Carline, Cassie and Celine. So we have three mares and a gelding. He is supported in the cones by Martin and Catherine Stockmeister. And his dad and brother, by the looks of things, were on the carriage in the marathon yesterday. Oh, dogfight in the background. So he's got through number 3 all right, which as did Christian and Ferenc. It was certainly a bit tricky for some of our earlier drivers. So very rarely do you get the clean sweep. There is that fairly long line between 17 and 18. There's a bit of a sweep from 13 to 14. But no sooner are you through. And the skill of driving, well, there's many skills involved in driving a successful cones course with a 4 in hand is obviously get each pair of horses through, make sure the back wheels are through, but you mustn't overdrive the front horses and be twiddling around too much. You've got to get the back end of the carriage through, because more often than not it's those back wheels that clip the cones. But the green light's popping on and coming down to commentary end of the arena. Very smooth so far. He's established a good rhythm and leaving the balls on, but there's still some more combinations to come through 16 going on to 17. Yeah, able to open. Oh gosh, cracking trot from his near side leader there. He really opened up through 17. 18, that narrow oxer sweep round to 19, and a little bit of a dog leg just to set himself up for 20. Just over on time, 3.88 seconds, which obviously being a round number means that divided by 2, or halved, should we say, 1.94, but that's good enough to put him currently into first place for the cones competition. So it looks like on current form we will be, when we get some of our more experienced drivers or those who are likely to be medaling, I would suggest we're going to get some double clears further down the line. If you remember at the World Championships, Brown was the only one that pulled off a double clear, and the look on his face, I think we all felt the relief and joy from him on that day. Now, who knows what is going through the minds of not just Bram. He is a slither ahead of Mikko Brokler and Koos de Ronde. There is nothing between the top 3. There's a ball between Bram and Koos, but Koos put in such a towering performance in with his big chestnut warm bloods yesterday, and although Mika was fastest in 5 of the 8, and Koos fastest in 3, Koos's averages, even in those ones where he wasn't the fastest, Michael slowed himself down a little bit in 7, as he said afterwards. He perhaps put on a little bit too much pressure, had a good line, and that brought down his average. So there was very, very little, less than a point, penalty point, between those two. So first and second in the marathon, and Glenn Geertz putting his tricky dressage, understandably considering what he and the family have been through recently, behind them, and was just had such poise and presence to pull off a great marathon. Sat at the top of the leaderboard in terms of the marathon for a long time on 1:19, and only Mikael and Koos, who were running towards the end of the order, knocked him off his perch, but did some great running there. Eisbrand, on balance, had a good marathon, just got slightly caught up. I think it was in number 3, which added some time to manage to get the horses unhitched, but slowed him down a bit because he had some fastest times as well. But in the meantime, back to the order of the day. 9B has just gone for Hungarian team member István Váci. He's currently 28th, so on the 10th of our four-in-hand drivers, and he's on 2:04.30 currently. But we've got an awful lot of them sitting very closely, less than a comb between them, even a time penalty. Another one who is driving a glorious team of grey Hungarian Lipizzaners. He's been competing for some years. He was at the World Championships last year. He was actually in Jerez for the World Equestrian Games back in 2002 when the team came 5th. He's got some Neapolitano horses, and for the cones he's got a stallion, a gelding, a stallion and a stallion. So there you go, 3 stallions, 1 gelding. He's got some of the Horvath family helping him. We have some of them helping behind the scenes here as well, scoring and in the organiser's office. Those grooms, they can't even twitch. It's actually harder than you think, sitting there quietly, not getting involved. 9B, still the only one he's had down so far, but you'll tell relatively young, these horses, because the greys, when they've got this darker colouring, each coat change, they'll have their summer coats and their winter coats, and each time the coats change they get a little bit lighter. The winter coats tends to be lighter with greys than the summer coat, and often all across bays as well, chestnuts, you can have really different markings, dapples and things that come out. But just 9B for him, a little to add on time. That was 200.66, so 10.66 seconds over. 5.33 for time penalties gives him a cones total of 8.33. Currently puts him into 6th position, but drops him behind Marcus. Marcus has done nothing wrong with his cones round, just to add on 1.94. So for the Hungarian team, István adds a little bit to his score and is currently in 2nd. So Marcus has moved in front of him after his excellent cones run. Now, the first of 3 French drivers, they had Benjamin in particular. Benjamin Eliot had a very good marathon yesterday with his Lusitanos, but for the French team, Maxim Maricourt, he is from Ouville-la-Bien-Tournée in France, driving some KWPN horses, the Dutch warm bloods, so favoured by many of our sport drivers. They just have this very distinctive conformation, these great long legs that cover the ground, the Usain Bolts of the driving world. Out of harness, they look extraordinary. I remember when the Gelderlanders first came over to be used for coaching in the United Kingdom. Oops, and it looks like we have a harness malfunction there. There's something dangling on the ground. Something dangling. Now, is anybody going to get a leg caught? He's pushing on at the moment, Maxim. Yeah, I think that's a bell ring for that. Now, that looks to be a little bit similar to what happened to Ijsbrand in his... just bring the horse forward, it's just standing on it. That is a trace and a trace carrier by the looks of things. So that's grooms down whilst they just sort out the harness malfunction. So that will be some really frustrating penalties to add. So first incident for the grooms off, 5 penalties. And by the looks of things, it's just stopped up. So it's the near side, the left-hand leader. And we'll be able to tell you a bit more, but
We can restart this before 7.
yeah, so has to wait for that bell to ring. You mustn't start before the bell rings, otherwise you'll get yourself eliminated. Oh, but that's frustrating. Now, you can see what's happened there. Obviously, a little bit like Ijsbrand in the dressage, that trace carrier, that strap that either goes sort of over the loins or the hips. I know there's a lady that will pick me up on that, Minter Win. Not all the drivers use them. You tend to have them on your lead horses just to keep those traces upright, so that you don't get the hind leg over. And interestingly, we see more in coaching the legs when you're driving these very, very leggy horses, in terms of the coaching where the harnesses and the lines of draft, the lower the traces are attached, the more chances there are of getting a leg over the trace, and be it the leader's front legs or the wheeler's hind legs. And it happens more and more because of these very, very long-legged, high-stepping Dutch horses. Well, they're not exclusively Dutch, but just this particular type. They've got these quite small rib cages for the size of them. They're not deep horses at all, very shallow. And as I was saying just before the harness malfunction, when they're out of harness, they have these extraordinarily flat backs that run sort of almost from the withers straight back to the top of the croup. The tails are set high. They don't have sort of a rounded back end at all. And if you came up through Pony Club like I did, and you did all your tests, B tests or H tests or whatever it was, C test, and you had to go through what was a good conformation for the horse, or if you have a showing background, like many of us do in the United Kingdom, we have a great system of county shows, and it's something that really is all about conformation, because we say good conformation in a horse enables better going. But the way these horses are shaped, very different. It's obviously, it's unsettled, that lead horse a little bit, is unsettled by the harness, stopping, it's flicking his tail a little bit, but it's okay, they're carrying on well held. So that's the 5 penalties on there would have been for the groom dismounting. But they have this natural high head carriage, the way the head is set onto the neck. They've got long, long faces, these horses, and high necks onto the shoulders. But it does give them this incredible profile when they're all together. Well held together, Maxim. It's not easy when you've had a bit of an unsettling time like that, and certainly that... Oh, I see. Yes, it was the crupper that came off as well. That's why there was so much harness there. That's why the horse is flicking its tail so much, because it's not used to being driven without a crupper. Oh, goodness. So looked like the back strap, which is the strap that goes from the back of the pad along the top of the spine. You can just have a look properly on the greys. That shows up properly. Now, all is well in the world from the commentary box, because hands down, no impartiality, the most handsome horses here. And they just fill the eye so beautifully, these Kladruber stallions. Look at them glowing in this Dutch sunshine. Being driven by Yuri Nesvasil Jr. You've seen his father go through. His brother will be coming through later with his darker horses. He's not driving these handsome Kladrubers. They're jolly nice horses, but they're not a patch on these in terms of sheer majesty. Currently in 26th place on 203.50. These were also in Protoni, the World Championship, and Yuri works at the National Stud, which is a UNESCO heritage site, and they've had, like many of our European heritage breeds, they've had quite a checkered history depending on the geopolitical fortunes of families like the Habsburg of the Danish court, probably even the British royal family as well, and some of these nations under the veil of communism, when it wasn't this sort of pastime of carriage driving, and even sport and pleasure riding wasn't always looked upon so favourably, and these horses had quite a checkered history, but similar bloodlines to foundation stallions and mares going back through some of the Lipizzaners it's shared, and they come in this grey or the blacks. The blacks tended to be used for church or religious ceremonial work, and these greys, not only do they look majestic, but they were used for royal ceremonial work to pull the royal carriages as well. And over the years, the careful line breeding, and they have retained their handsome Roman noses, and they're just beautiful horses inside and out. They've got great natures as well, and Yuri works with these mainly stallions, but as I've said all through the commentary here from Exloo, if you get a chance to do some researching on the internet, on your computers, phones, iPads, wherever you may be watching, just search up the Kladruber stud and you will see these wonderful drone images of them with, oh gosh, 20 or 30 pairs going out in sleighs through the snow. It's pure romanticism in equine form. So for the cones, we've got actually 3 stallions and a gelding. The Generalissimus prefix for these Kladruber lines. The stud is not too far from Prague, so I was actually in Prague earlier on in the year, but it was a flying visit. We'll be going there again soon, and, well, a beautiful drive from some beautiful horses. Well done, Yuri. You played your part as well. And a clear round now. You've made a commentator very, very happy in a little box in a corner of an arena in northeast Holland. A beautiful, beautiful round in a time of 183.60, but that's just what these horses do so well. They trot beautifully, they found their rhythm, they worked well as a team, there was no bickering or arguing, no malfunctions, and when they drive like that in your hand, you're able to pull off a wonderful double clear just like that. So, well done, Yuri. That puts him currently into first position, and depending on what follows on, he may well find himself climbing up the scoreboard. But that time, tremendous time, 183.60. If there is a tie after the cones, don't forget this is as well as contributing to the overall positions after the 3 phases, A, B and C. There is also a separate cones competition, so if we have a tie, we may have to have a drive-off at some point. But we'll just have to wait and see how things pan out. Anthony Terhamsel driving as an individual. Yuri was actually part of the Czech team, but we're back onto one of the individuals. And because some of the nations like Hungary, the Netherlands and Germany have such a depth of talent, and the chef d'équipes and the national coaches are really quite spoilt for choice as to who they put onto their national teams. And Anthony, who has also done lots of pair driving with great success, and gosh, just got away with that. Look at those lines in the sand. Horses trotting nicely for him. Look nice and light in his hand. Just what you want, responsive, not getting too heavy. If anything, you'd rather have a shade too heavy than too light. You don't want them sitting behind the bit, as we say, and just not listening to you, which sometimes they can do. If some of the older horses who think they know a bit better, I've got a mare like that who just goes, nope, I don't need your help today. And that's very frustrating, particularly in the cones, when it's all about precision. You must set yourself up for those lines. There's very, very little, 10 centimetres on either side. That's all there is of your wheels, even less when you're going through those narrow cones. The blue oxes. 1 to add so far, so that keeps Yuri and the beautiful Kladrubers in front. 6B, 3 to add so far, on to a total of 205.55. Anthony was sitting in 25th position. And Janos Pap just coming into view there. So how's Anthony doing? Just that pesky double L for him, the middle element, B. So 3 to add so far. Lots of advantages to driving these long-legged horses, but not least just the amount of ground they eat up with just one stride. If you're driving small ponies, it might feel like they're going very fast, but they have probably 2 strides if they're up against a cob. That's just a ball gone then. Yes, they have to work even harder if they don't have these long legs, but that's 1 gone at 19, so 2 to add 6. Very good time, though. Well judged on the time. 0.62 over, which gives him 0.31 time penalties. 6.31, just a frustrating late ball there for him at 19. Yuri stays in front on 203.50, and that just pops Anthony down to 3rd position on a total of 208.68. Marcus Stockmeister remains for the time being in 2nd on his total of 208.06, only 0.8 in front of Anthony, but that doesn't matter at this stage in the competition. You'll take the smallest of margins, and Maxim and Istvan are currently tied in 4th position. Of course, this will all change the further through the running order we go. They are both on 212.63. Slotted just in behind them in 6th place, Christian Schockelhofer for Austria, 212.76, very close. And then there's quite a gap back to Ferenc, who's currently in 7th. But for the Hungarian team, and another breed that has a rich heritage, stems from a stolen French stallion who they think was had a bit of either Norfolk trotter or thoroughbred blood in him. These Nonius mares, and again, like the Kladrubers and some of the Lipizzaners, have had, oh gosh, ebbed and flowed in popularity. Currently, I think about 500 breeding mares, but Janos Pap, who works at the Hungarian stud, and drives all mares, the only team that we have on at the championships where they're all ladies. And again, a proficiency in Roman numerals helps because we've got, they're all nonius something with a Roman numeral behind them. We've got Baboka, Adele, Aporka, Cerna and Zemplin, quite young, ranging in ages from 7 to 10. And for the cones, he's chosen Zemplin, Baboka, Aporka and Cerna. Janos took up the sport in 1990, formerly a pony pair driver as well. Going well through the cones, lots of green lights pinging onto the screen here so far. And flowing forward with his mares. A bit like in the marathon, some drivers lean forward, some sit up and keep the bodies open, just very much down to personal preference and habit over the years. And if you have long arms, as we saw with somebody like Bram Chardon, really does help when you're doing your free walks on a long rein, because you don't have to let the reins go forward so the buckles are in front of your hands. The long levers do help in driving. In fact, interesting walking the cones just beforehand. There does seem to be, not all of them, but most carriage drivers, certainly the men, are very tall. So the star next to the name denotes that the athlete is a member of the national team. You can have 2 to 3 members in a team. The advantage of having 3 is that you get to drop 1 score per phase or section or competition if you have got 2 better ones, and so it is an average out of 2 scores. Just the same for the para equestrian competition, which will be getting underway before too long. We're well underway. Only a few more to go. Tom Stockman's, Axel Olin, Rainer Duen and Mark Westoff. And we will have, oops-a-daisy. Now, that might end up being a bit expensive because going to be rebuilt. It was all going quite well, actually. It was going very well. Yes, so he's going to be penalised for having 12 down. Whether that's classified as a rebuild or not, it shouldn't be, really. So, not too bad on, 10 and 19. Yes, just slight change there in the information coming through. So 10 and 19 went, but annoyingly got through 10. And then it was afterwards. So all going very well right until those last few seconds. The time was 200.39, which gave him 10.39 seconds over, which halved is 5.20. So he's 10th overall in the cones. Wasn't given extra penalty for rebuilding and extra time, just annoyingly for knocking that number 10 as he was just trying to finish off his course. I think the horses just locked onto that. That can be really frustrating in cones when your horses lock onto something, which means that the lead horses, or whichever you're driving, whatever combination, decide that they really want to go through what they perceive to be the cones, or in obstacles, the gate in front of them. And particularly if you're driving a tandem, one in front of the other, can make life quite interesting. Tom Stockman's now for the Belgian team. Glenn Geertz put in a great round yesterday to end 3rd in the marathon, which was such a relief, not just to him, but to the family and to Glenn's parents. If you are watching from home, we are missing you here in Exloo. It is very, very rare that Glenn's mum and dad aren't here, but after their dreadful accident in the horse box, we are thrilled that they are on the mend, and we hope that we see you very soon, certainly when Glenn's back out on the World Cup circuit, which he should be. we look forward to seeing you at some of those indoor events in the coming months. So Tom Stockman's for Belgian has put in a great team performance. Dries did a very, very good dressage, 51.9, I think it was, something round about that, for the to set them up for a podium place. They've got quite a margin between them and France at the moment in terms of the team standing. Tom with his Arabo Frisians, two that used to be driven by Frenchman Ben Aoud, who we will see before too long. He was another one that had a cracking marathon. And this is an interesting combination of two very different breeds and types, not just in looks, but in temperament. And some very clever breeders over the years, not least a gentleman that breeds these horses, had decided to, the sort of stability, the conformation, in conventional terms, sort of these lovely Frisian horses, but this is why they're so popular for weddings and in particular funerals, because they're pretty steady in their temperaments. Even the stallions, a lot of people keep them entire for driving, even commercially. But to inject some of the pizzazz and fire of the Arab bloods, it makes them a little bit finer in type. It can be certainly quite heavy in the leg with big bone. And some line breeding, as we say, for them. Horses tend to have about 12.5% Arab blood to qualify as the Arabo Frisians. Similar classifications for some of the Dutch sport horses and ponies. They all have to be inspected and classified if they're going to be signed off for that. And a great round for Tom. I think there's some Belgians here cheering him on. Not as fast as Yuri, but very, very well judged round. That was clear in 186.93. Puts him into second place in the cones competition. And he leapfrogs into first place currently with a good margin. He's now on 199.70. So the first of our sub 200 athletes in this first session of the 4 in-hand cones. So just change in leadership there. Yuri remains in front for the cones competition with that great time that he put down with the Kladrubers. But Tom Stockman's, as you will have heard from the Belgian support team here, did everything right with that, beautifully judged in terms of time, and all the balls stayed on top, no elements being knocked. He was out in Beekbergen, Aachen, Samur, Royal Windsor and Kronenberg. So rounding off a really good outdoor season for him. Now, the greys of Axel Olin, who put down some very good times. He was one of the first to go out on the marathon yesterday, and no doubt was being watched by quite a few of the later drivers. Horses went well for him through the obstacles. And he finds himself currently in 22nd position. But very, very tight margins. Now we're getting into, he's on 198.01, and Tom, after that great cones round, stays on his 199.70. So Axel, no pressure, but no time penalties, and certainly no dropping balls if you're going to stay ahead of Tom. The Swedes have 2 in the team. They are very much part of the 8 national team event. And Fredrik Persson, who pulled off an extraordinary test in some dreadfully wet conditions. The heavens just suddenly opened on Friday. It wasn't easy for the last few of the 4-in-hands, but they all held their cool, even though the rains were getting slippy. And as Marika Harms said afterwards, she said it was such a shame. Her crew had spent days and days polishing the harness and getting the horses ready. They had their lovely shining coats, and they just had to get ready and warm up. It wasn't really warming up, it was getting soggy ahead of their dressage. But it didn't stop some good tests later on in the day. Nicely matched pair of leaders here, striding very evenly. Dutch warm bloods. There's a Hungarian sport horse in there. There's a grey of unknown breeding, but of Dutch origin. In this team, we have Kenzie, Lucky VS, Minima, and Orbit. Yeah, warm bloods by and large. Orbit, probably the slightly darker one, but they've got this beautiful sort of dapple on them. Just that offside wheeler there with his dark colouring, much easier to keep clean when they're like this. But they will be white one day as they get older, a bit like us going grey over time. Happens to us all. Through 18, this is looking to be very good so far. Let's hope the commentator's curse doesn't kick in. Just got 19 to go. It was the undoing of poor Janos Pap because he'd had to go around. Yep, there we go, commentator's curse. Number 19, but didn't take out another cone. So 1 to go there, but otherwise a very solid round in terms of the Swedish team effort from Axel Olin. Number 19, it's been another tricky one. Again, that can happen as you get towards the end of the course. You've concentrated so hard, but you really can't relax until those back wheels are through the exit gates and the clock stops. But a very good time of 183.44. So looks like those that are sorting out these timings have been pretty user-friendly in terms of it being attainable. So Tom stays in front, Yuri drops down to third, Axel is currently sitting in second, as we just have the last couple of four-in-hand drivers. We'll have a quick break and then we start on the Grade 1 paras. So there will be a bit of an adjustment for the course between the single horses and ponies and the fours. So Rainer Duen, as an individual for Germany, this really strong squad they brought here. The national team, Mareike Harm and Anna Sandman, both very elegant dressage drivers. They were in first and third as individuals and kept Germany in the top spot going into the marathon, and then the Netherlands just nudged ahead, largely because of Kroos's very, very good marathon, but there's less than a ball between them. So wouldn't it be brilliant to be a fly on the wall in their team talks, although they've all been there and done it so many times before. I mean, that's what you bring at this level, the wealth of experience. You don't put the green athletes on the national teams if you can help it, and certainly those two nations have the luxury of having a depth of talent and experience, which is why they are consistently at the top and on the podiums. Rainer Duen, as an individual, sitting in 21st position. Mark Westoff will be the last to go for this morning session, sitting in 20th. So we've run through from positions 38 to 20 in reverse order, but seen some very good cones round so far, and there's every chance that one of the drivers from this early session may well be in the prize giving for the cones, but we've got some big names to come later on in the day. But a brief break, well, relatively brief, as we move to our Para World Championships for Grade 1 and Grade 2. Going forward with the Grade 1s to start off with. So we will have 8 of the Grade 2s. Sadly, one of them will not be joining us. They didn't finish the marathon, but otherwise we will have all of the Grade 1 coming forward, including the great Heiner Lerter, also for Germany. Still an array of green lights on the screen, so great round so far. If he can keep this going, he will put in a very good bid for a double clear, but good pacing. Still quite a lot to go though. 15. These 4 elements of 16. That's just a slight squeak of the brakes there. And through there cleanly. A, B, C, D can be expensive if you just get you're set up on the wrong line in these zigzags or waves or these multiple elements. But no problem there for Rayner. He's the son of the former national driver and team coach Bernard Dern. He has also been competing in show jumping, professional horseman and breeder, has been a national German champion and Westphalian state coach, driving a mixture of some German breeds, Bay Holstein, Westphalian, one Dutch sport horse, and in third, due to his time, but just perfectly judged, 189.75.25 in under the time. Beautifully judged, so a double clear in terms of the overall score. In terms of the individual cones competition, he sits in third position at the moment. Yuri's, or should I say the Kladruber's wonderful round, keeping them at the top at the moment. But that changes the leaderboard just now. He stays ahead of Tom Stockman's 196.62, and Tom is on 199.70, but Tom absolutely brilliant in terms of the Belgian team. And the last of the drivers in this morning's session, lying in 20th, Mark Westoff, who had a really big support crowd with him yesterday, and there is a reason for this, that he will be retiring after this event from international competition, so there will be a bit of a tribute to Mark Westoff. He is one of the original of the modern successful Dutch drivers, and we have a short film to celebrate Mark's contribution to not just Dutch driving, but international four-in-hand driving, which will be following on from this. The greys and the bays there. And one of his horses, this was the one whose grandfather was a Hurstwood Sebastian, the Hurstwood stud. So famous in terms of the Hackney breed, and Frank Hayden, who was one of the instigators of the modern sport, very much a figure who helped ratify the rules alongside his great friend Prince Philip. Otherwise, we have some Dutch warm bloods, as you can see, quite distinctive. But Barson's Romeo, just see if you can spot which one you think might be the Hackney in this team. I'm going to leave that for you at home, but fairly distinctive in terms of body shape and way of going. Quite fine in the legs by comparison to his three big mates. All geldings, Barson's Romeo, that's the one with the Hackney blood, Dorian Fortuna, Ferdinand S, and first one. Those are the four being used. He was 16th in Beekbergen, 12th in Larden, and 15th in Kronenberg. Has been on Dutch teams over the years, was in Jerez on the gold-winning team, and in 2008. And has won gold and silver, being a stalwart of the four-in-hand scene in the Netherlands, who have played host to, so far, an absolutely wonderful championship for the European four-in-hands, and shortly we will return to our World Championship for the para equestrians. (195.73) his current total, which, yes, with the cone down, he's just going to be popping back down the order. And I've got a few, yeah, that was an expensive run through the zigzag for Mark. Frustrating C and 18. So 16C and 18 have gone, but there will be a very big cheer for Mark Westoff as he rounds off an illustrious career and contribution to driving here in the Netherlands. Emotional for not just Mark, but those watching on, and look at all those orange tops. Big cheer for Mark Westoff, rightly so. We salute you, sir. So that brings a close to this morning's proceedings in terms of the cones competition. Yuri and his wonderful quadrupers are in first position. All three of the top three had double clears, but in terms of the time, it was Yuri that put in that great time. Tom Stockman's for the Belgian team, also clear, and Rainer Duen for Germany. Those are the top three. In terms of the standings, the totals, Rainer Duen is in first place, 196.62. Tom Stockman's 199.70, and Axel Olin for Sweden, 201.01. So that is on your screens. The stars denote that those athletes are part of the national teams, but the results for these drivers, they can do no more. Their competition has come to a close. Results A, B, and C, Rainer Duen. So what we have here going on live, just behind all the scores and the names on your screens, is a presentation to Mark Westoff.
Hoe je snel en met respect naar je paarden door de hindernis gift, fenomenaal. Dat is altijd genieten. Een vastgestane grens, dat hebben we ook gisteren weer gezien. Wist wel wie ze wilde volgen in de marathon. Jarenlang was je de vierde man voor het Nederlandse team. Niet altijd de leukste plek. Maar wat is er dan toch?
Just coming into vision there is Cindy Timmer, and all of us involved behind the scenes here at Exloo. We thank Cindy for her hard work and the team around her. And they work incredibly hard throughout the year. Cindy doesn't just work on this event. She comes through all Windsor. She's just been drafted in to help at Le Pen. So Cindy standing next to our commentator here on the ground, that's Bert, as we have an acknowledgement and salute and farewell to the great Mark Westoff.
Op de eerste plaats en tweede tijd tot nu toe is nummer 8. Ja, en dan hebben ze toch nog geleden, want dan staat het tot nu toe op de tweede plaats, de tussenplaats. Ja, dat is de handhandel. En de tijd
Een man die altijd fijn aan het rijden is, altijd zijn paarden op de eerste plaats.
Just have a short film to share with you that the media team have put together, showing this was Mark on the marathon yesterday, clocking up some very good scores. And if you look in the crowd, you'll notice that his particular fan club had those blue t-shirts on. There we are, the Mark gang.
Mark Westoff for the Netherlands. Mark Westoff. He's going very well in the marathon with the team of Greys, the Gilberlanders. Mark Westoff. And he certainly is clocking up some of the best times so far.
Maar die overigens aangegeven, dit is de laatste seizoensjes. Hij heeft nou een internationale wedstrijd en dan gaat hij stoppen. Het zou best wennen wezen, want de man die eigenlijk alleen altijd naar
Prachtige beelden, dames en heren. Mark Westoff neemt afscheid van de wedstrijd sport. De steekzaakstrijder Arjan Leijdan namens de organisatie van dit EK en WK bij zit maar daarbij. De fans op de tribune. Mooie muziek daarachter. Dames en heren, afscheid van Mark Westoff van de wedstrijd sport.
Emotional scenes here in Exloo as Mark just picks up the microphone and talks in Dutch to the crowd. And for those of you that just watched the short film that the team here put together, you would have heard the voice of the late, great Mike Tucker.
Totaal met mijn vader 40 jaar. De gaat is eigenlijk veel steun. 20 op gepast die afsluiten. Allemaal bedankt voor deze geweldige tijd. Wat we met z'n allen hadden. Collega-rijders, Exloo, mijn familie en vooral mijn team. Daar breng ik dan heel veel tijd mee door. En ja, we hebben een vaste club. En daar hebben we altijd heel veel van genoten. En allemaal hartstikke bedankt.
Emotionele woorden van Mark Westoff bij de laatste internationale wedstrijd. Dames en heren, nog een keer. Jaren toe, Mark Westoff. En we klappen even mee, met z'n allen. Let's see you. En dan gaan we nog een keer toejuichen. Daar komt hij, Mark Westoff. De wedstrijd aan. De man met het wedstrijd. De man met het wedstrijdschap. Groot geworden in deze sport. Dat is van de wedstrijdsport van Mark Westoff.
So that's really charged up the atmosphere here in the big arena in Exloo. And of course, back to business. He needs to have his wheel width checked. That's what's going on at the top end of the arena. And you can just see in the background, that's the commentary position that we are broadcasting round the world. And thank you very much for being with us over the last few days. We started on Thursday morning in the most glorious sunshine for the dressage. The day before that, we did have the horse inspection. There were 220 horses that had to be examined. We had 39 four-in-hand drivers starting. Each had brought 5 horses, and then we have our para athletes competing for their world championship grades 1 and 2. And now we have had Mark finish his cones, and this wonderful tribute to him as he retires from this level of four-in-hand driving, although one suspects he certainly will be seen out and about. In the meantime, we have a little bit of arena maintenance, and the cones have been narrowed. They have been narrowed because we operate on a different wheel width from the four-in-hands. So just quietly, whilst that lovely presentation was going on, and really quite emotional, everybody excited, sad, enjoying the memories, and certainly for me, hearing Mike's voice brought back all sorts of memories. So we will get underway just in a minute or two with the first of the paras, and that will be for grade 1, Tracy Spencer, living the dream. As she said, 10 years she's been wanting to do this. She's here with her long-term coach, Sarah Howe, who herself is absolutely no stranger to top-level international sport. Sarah, whose family are absolutely steeped, not just in driving. She sadly lost, parents and all, Barry as well recently, been through quite a lot, but they were tremendous drivers and dressage people as well. And Sarah and daughter Philippa Howe, who has recently become mum to twins, boys. She already had another one, so very busy life in the Howe household. And Sarah's been coaching Tracy Spencer, who will be starting. There she comes into view for the British squad. She's not a member of the actual national team, but just to be here. And there comes into view Sarah Howe. Sarah is a brilliant coach and is particularly encouraging if you've got anybody who's a bit nervous or novice, or certainly for our youth drivers. Couldn't wish to have anybody more enthusiastic. Each lesson she treats like it's her first. Very, very encouraging. Here with Trish. Sit up, she's saying. She's got a voice that can cut through glass. And if the family are listening at home, you'll be going, oh gosh, there's mum. But has been working so hard to keep everyone together, to keep everyone happy. They've got a big camp, the British squad, just behind the buildings across the road, the Paris squad. And Sarah's been one of the team leaders there, just making sure that everybody, not only all the athletes are fit, and we mean horse and equine, but that the heads of horse and equine are in the right place too. It's very nerve-wracking, particularly if you're somebody like Tracy, who is competing at your first international event, and it happens to be a world championship as well. So an awful lot to take on board, and quite difficult not to let the nerves get the better of you. And that's why you have somebody of Sarah's experience on your shoulder.
Namelijk aan het wereldkampioenschap.